Hey guys, and welcome to Gaz-D-Projects. We're going to be looking at the V-brake system today. We're going to be looking at changing out the cables and servicing it and putting it together. So first we'll have a look at the actual V-brake itself, the pad and the post and spring system. The actual block itself consists of concave and convex spacers and washers, and the reason why they're shaped like this is because they facilitate setting up the block in a position known as toe in and toe out. And sometimes you'll see if brakes are lined up to the rim square on and there's no toe in or toe out, you can get vibration in the hub, also known as a harmonic resonation. And how to alleviate that is you just set the toe in and the toe out. Another quick way of doing it as well is if you have a rubber band or a bit of tape, insulation tape, you can effectively set toe in and toe out using a band. So what you would do is you just wrap the band around the pad like so. A little bit easier. There's no gloves on. Like so, like that, and this gap down will factor in your toe in, your toe out on the actual brake pad itself. The components then of the actual poster lever itself, we have the spring. And this basically puts tension onto the post, and it works in tandem or in a linear motion then with the other brake pad and post on the other side of the fork. We have the brass bush here on the inside of the lever itself, and this sometimes gets overlooked. It doesn't get maintained or greased up sufficiently. Same for the nylon bush here. It gets overlooked and doesn't get checked for signs of damage or replaced. And then the plastic receiver, the spring, and the rest of the system itself. The other thing as well on forks as well, some forks should I say, are brazed. The bolt post for the actual lever or the post itself is brazed onto the fork here. This system is a type of friction compression fit. It's screwed on, and then you have your little spring receiver hole here. So it just sits on like this, and as tightened up, it puts a compression or pressure on here, and it stays in position. This is your bolt that screws on the actual lever post itself onto here. You should always grease the outside of this, never the inside where it's threaded with the bolt. There's a reason why there's blue thread lock on the bolt, and that's obviously to stop the bolt from coming loose and vibrating loose. These are also have a torque set on these when you're putting them in. It's somewhere in the region of between 6 to 8 Newton meters. So yeah, try not to get grease in where the threads are. That's what the thread lock is for. Okay. The other thing as well is have a look inside here. The threads are. The receiver is for said bolt, and make sure it's nice and clean. If there's no damage to the threads themselves, this is another area that gets overlooked by other bike techs. They don't check in here to make sure it's nice and clean, and that it's tapped out nicely as well. Now if you're in the position that you have a tap and die system, use them. So this is a tap, this is an M8 tap, and the thread depth or thread pitch can be measured from the inside of here, so it's somewhere in the region of 1 to 1.75. So all you're doing is you're lining up your tap, there's a hole, and you are effectively just cleaning the thread or re-tapping the thread. And this is aluminium, guys, okay? Aluminium is very soft, it's a very soft material, and you have to be careful that we don't strip threads or that we don't cause any unnecessary or undue damage. Now steel is a lot more forgiving, and you can get away with a certain amount of things. So just up here out of the way for a second. So what you do then is, if you were to try and clean it out and re-tap, use a bit of WD or cutting fluid. And what you want to do is you want to go in, say, a full turn, and then come out half a turn. So you want to go in, say a full turn there, and just come back half a turn, and then gradually work your way in again to 1.5, come back out the half. Okay, and all you're doing is tapping and then just basically cleaning up the thread so that the lever post itself can receive the actual bolt that goes inside of there. If you have a little brush, try and clean out the inside of any filings that you just threaded there. Just make sure that there's nothing still in there. So just put it inside and just give it a quick clean. I've already done this one. This one's good to go. So this one was left off just to show you guys, to make sure that we clean the threads out. And then we get cameraman Killian to try and zoom in on the thread itself, and you'll see that that's cleaned up now, and we have a nice thread profile on the inside, and the actual bolt itself is ready to be received. If you come across dirt or damage on this threaded area here, you can of course use a die and re-tap it, but most of the time it's generally just dirt. And what you can do is you can just get a wire brush and just basically clean the thread itself. Hold it down and just give it a quick rub. You can put that into a vice or a vice grips and do it that way. Work your way the whole way around with the wire brush. Make sure it's nice and clean. Once it's clean, then you can reinstall back onto the fork like so. Actually, one other thing I should mention, this actually has a flat spot here on both sides, and that's to facilitate you putting a wrench, adjustable wrench, or a spanner, or a vice grips, to put that back in. If it's got paint on it, obviously try and not damage the paint. So that should be nice and easy to go in. Shouldn't really be any major restriction. So that feels like that's nice there. So what we'll do then is we'll put our little spring receiver onto the other end. And I should probably mention as well, when we're setting up the brakes, these 3 holes apply different spring loads onto the actual post itself, the lever itself. And we'll look at that later, but that just to bear in mind. So obviously we want to go in the same orientation as the other side. So we'll just line things up like so, and we'll just thread that back in. As I said, I have seen on other forks that these are either raised or welded on to the actual fork itself, but in this instant it's like a compression style fit. Okay, so I'll see if I can get a little spanner here for a second. Moving out of the way. There. So this won't need much tension on this. All we're trying to do is make sure it's seated nicely. It's gone back, and that we're lining up. Make sure that they're in the same orientation. You may have to ease it back a little bit and just reposition, and as you tighten it will also move. Okay, so we're looking good there. We'll just try and give it a little bit more of a pinch. Okay, so yeah, that's looking good, and that's not going anywhere. It's nice and tight, so we're happy enough with that. Now it's probably fairly obvious that I've obviously taken off the actual lever and post first to get to this stage. So you take off the posts themselves, take off the cable, pull the noodle away from the receiver, get to this stage, and then all you want to do then is remove the cable from the brake itself and the barrel here. So just make sure that we wind out the barrel. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the little split line on the barrel, cameraman Killian might just pick that up, the split here, so everything is lined up, and that's to facilitate the cable coming out. So if we look at the bottom here, what we want to do is make sure that that is like that basically. So then when it comes to here, we're pulling this out and we're looking for our cable to pop out. Okay. So once we've done that, we want to remove the cable cover end. So Qkurt of course uses snips. We have all new cabling, so this cable doesn't really matter. We also have new boots as well. So this is the old noodle. This, what gets overlooked here is the noodle itself. When it's sitting in this orientation, you can find that water ingress can get in here and work its way down into the noodle and cause corrosion. And you'll sometimes feel that in the brake lever itself. When you go to pull it, it's a little bit stiffer than normal, and a telltale and tongue-tied now. A telltale sign is that the cable itself has some form of corrosion on it. So if we try and remove the cable from the noodle, this also has an inner liner, so straight off the bat there we can see corrosion on the inner liner of the noodle. So we'll just pull that out altogether. So the actual liner here goes on the inside of the aluminium noodle, and you'll find that there's corrosion and dirt and all sorts of things. And how you alleviate this problem is you put a bit of grease on the inside and here, and then you can of course put a little bit of grease or lubrication on the cable as well, and that will then future proof or aid you going forward then when it comes to having a bit of longevity on the bike itself. We won't be using any of these components because we have all new components, but it's just something to watch out for. If you are in a position where you're like, you know what, I need to reuse these, how can I do that? So you just clean these up, you lubricate them, and you reuse them. Okay. So another thing to check as well is, we do this on the floor. So sometimes these ends are crimped on, sometimes they're loose. This is actually crimped on because we have two crimp lines here. That's why it won't come off. But in order to reuse this, we want to check to make sure that it's in good working order, so there's no cracks. It's not stiff, it's flexible. Okay, so then we just use a bit of WD. We run it through just to check to make sure that there's no actual rust or corrosion on the inside. Run that all the way through. We'll clean that out. Once that's cleaned out, you can reuse it. Now, I wouldn't use WD when I'm putting the new cable back in. I find WD is more of a penetrator as opposed to a lubricator. Now you can of course use like a silicone type spray, or this stuff is quite good as well. Not a plug for GT85, but this stuff is quite good as well. It's lubricant with a penetrant inside it as well. So if you were to use a new cable, you would spray your cable, and you'd also spray in here. You might find it easier to remove that cap. Just use a little pliers or something, it'll pop right off. So there you go. Make sure it comes through and it's nice and clean. And then you can reuse this with a new cable. Okay, so we'll just move these to one side and we will focus on reinstalling our posts, our levers. So as I said before, we want to make sure that we grease these up when they're going back on. So all we want to do here, guys, is just lube the outside here. Okay, both sides, a little bit of lube. Try not to get the grease inside, doesn't do you any favors. Okay, that's literally all we're looking for here. And if you have any excess, put it onto the brass bush. Like so. Try not to get any onto the brake block. Any kind of oil or contaminant doesn't do any favors for the brake pad. So just try to make sure that that doesn't have any oil or grease on it. All you're looking to do then is put the lever back on. This is our spring pin here, so we need it to go into one of three of these holes. So somewhere in the middle is kind of like a medium tension. So we'll line it up, we'll put in our pin. To rotate, we'll find our bolt, our 5mm Allen key. We'll put in our, make sure there's no grease on that thread. Enough of that. We will of course torque these up at the later stage. So it's just coming up onto the thread lock there, that's why it's a little bit more stiff to rotate the bolt in. And that's a good thing. You want that stiffness there. The whole idea of thread lock is to protect you as a rider, that it's not going to vibrate loose as you ride on down the road. That one's on. So then we have a look then at the other lever post. Okay, so this just has the brass bush and it hasn't got the other components inside of it. So what we'll do is we'll put this together. Okay. So we need our receiver, this end, spring. Let's go on like so. Can be a bit finicky. Put it on the bench. Be a bit easier to put together. Okay.
2 hours and 23 minutes later.
Okay guys, so we have the spring back together along with the plastic components and the bush. What you're looking for is to make sure that the spring is seated in behind the post receiver here, and that the screw is pointed towards the end spring. This is what puts pressure onto the spring by turning in and out this screw. So once we have it all together like so, we just want to put a bit of grease on the inside of the brass bush and the nylon bush right here. Okay, so a little bit of grease on the inside right there. We don't have to go crazy, just a small amount. And we're trying not to get grease on the inside of our threads. Also, on the receiver. So same again, we want to ensure that we use the middle hole for the spring. And line things up. Find the middle hole. Put it in. Try not to get grease everywhere, Gary. Can, of course, if you feel that there's some form of contamination against those pads, you can, of course, wrap them with a bit of tape, a bit of painter's tape. It's like a paper tape, just to protect them. It's probably a bit going overboard, but look, different strokes for different folks, you know yourself, guys. Just a little bit of grease there on the thread. I just want to make sure that we get it out. Okay, that looks good. We will find our bolt, which is up here somewhere. Okay, go. And this bolt also has the thread lock on it. Now it's only a small amount, because that's all it takes, guys. It's only a small amount of thread that's needed on this bolt. Okay, and you're only applying 6 to 8 newton meters of torque when you're putting it back in. Now we should feel that resistance when we get to the thread lock. So if I screw it in, I bring it up to the thread lock, and you guys might be able to pick that up. Can you see the blue right here? And when it gets here, it will start to tighten up. See the way it's gone stiff now? That's a good thing. That's what we want. We don't want it to be spinning in freely and loose. So that's kind of what we're after. If that wasn't there, you would have to get some thread lock and put a bit onto it. Okay. Now when we're at this stage, you just want to check the springs themselves and the tension. Make sure we're happy with the tension. Remove any excess grease that we see. Okay. So what we're looking for both sides, we'll do them individually, is spring tension. So if I push this and I let my thumb go, it should spring back. And that means that that's now got tension on it and it's installed. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, so that's what we're after. And then the same with this side. Okay, we have spring tension. Okay, so all that's left to do from this point is just to torque up these two bolts. And we do that by using obviously a torque wrench. And we can set the torque wrench to the correct torque. We will go with 6 newton meters, which is right here. And our lock bolt. Always remember to dial this back to 0, and the reason why you do that is because you're trying to maintain the calibration in this torque wrench. So when you're finished with it, always bring it back to 0. Don't leave it on a torque setting. And the thing with torquing bolts as well is you want to have one continuous pull. You don't ever want to stop, otherwise you'll have to redo it again. You can just pinch these up with the Allen key itself. Save you spilling the torque wrench. So just when you feel that it's kind of pinched, okay, We'll use the torque wrench. We'll insert the 5mm into the screw, and what we'll do is we'll pull tension, we'll pull up, and what we're looking to do is we're looking to hear a click, and once we hear the click, then that means we reach torque. So that's it there. Okay, so we reached, that's 6 Newton meters. You can of course do 8 if you feel that's not enough, and there's no harm in doing that, going from a lower torque up to a higher torque. It's good practice. You wouldn't want to just jump straight to 8. You could probably get away with it on these bolts, but generally speaking, that's what you're after. So that wasn't far off there, so that's actually at the torque right there. Okay, they are actually a little bit loose, so what we'll do is we'll just adjust it and we'll go up to 8 Newton meters, which is right here. So that's the setting here. We're ensuring that it's spun, we're on the Newton meter side, and then it's set to, I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera, 8 Newton meters. And we're locking the bottom screw to ensure that doesn't move. Same again, goes in. We're going to pull our torque up until we hear our positive clicks. Once we hear the clicks, then we know we've reached our torque. We've got one continuous smooth movement. Okay, that's 8 Newton meters. And we're going to go on to the other side here, and we're going to pull. That's it. We've reached our torque specification. So from a torquing point of view, that's pretty much it done. So all that's left then is to install our new cable into the brake lever. Now there is if you have slightly not as long fingers as I have, we can adjust. Say for example it's there somewhere, right? You slightly shorter fingers, you can adjust that, and how you do that is there's a screw right here, right on top, and what we do is we wind the screw in, and that sets the limit on the brake if you have shorter fingers. I have quite long fingers, so it's pretty much out the whole way there. Well, it's out a little bit. That's how you would adjust that. Okay, so we need to get our enclosure for the cable, and we also need to get a brake cable itself. Here is our new, brand spanky new brake cable. You'll find that there's 2 ends on these cables, and they're to facilitate different types of brake lever. In this case we're going to be going with this one. So once we've decided that, you snip off that end, you no longer need it. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our lever. We will put in our cable as so. Bring it around, and remember to line our screw barrel up to the slot on the brake so that it all lines up. Once it's lined up, then you can just thread that back in the whole way. Once it's threaded in the whole way, it's generally a good idea just to screw it back maybe half a turn, just to allow for a little bit of play in the adjustment of the cable. So the cable is in. What's left to do now? Gotta run the cable through the hip receiver and protector. Okay, so I'll just spin this off. Okay, and if you're like, oh, what length will I use, or where will I cut it? Cut it here, because you don't need this and you want to maximize the length, so just cut it there. Okay, that's now gone. Try and get yourself a decent cutter like this, and only ever use the cutter to cut cable. Don't cut anything else with it, because it will of course cause damage and blunt the snips itself. We've already cleaned this out and pre-lubed it. So we're just going to run the cable through like so. Nice and smooth, no resistance. Run the cable the whole way up. And we want to make sure that our cable cover goes into the barrel like so. And that we have our cable here. Now I suppose it's probably a good idea to throw on a wheel or a rim here. Actually, we don't have to. We can do it. We can do it later. Thinking ahead there. Okay, so we have a brand new noodle and the rubber receiver. Although it seems like it's a little bit longer than the original boot. We can have a look at that when we get to that stage. Okay. Actually, while we're here, no harm just to give it a little spray, and we can put a bit of grease on top just to stop that water ingress from getting in. Okay, you don't have to go crazy. It's just enough to stop water getting in and causing corrosion, rust. Okay, nice and smooth. Pull that up. Okay, so that's nice. Okay. Put the noodle into its receiver. The cable through. Some lads, they overlap, get the cable to sit in, but if you want to do it properly, open this side in and just pull down and try and maintain a bit of pressure there. Okay. They're 5mm again. Actually, now that I think of it, I think these torques are 8 to 10 and these are 6 to 8 Newton meters. We might adjust them again to 10. Okay, so that's getting a pinch there. So we just basically want to pull in our cable roughly somewhere. Now obviously we're going to need to have the rim on. We'll just roughly give it a pinch there. Now, the eagle-eyed among us will cop that we forgot to do one thing. What's that one thing we forgot to do? We forgot to put on our rubber grommet. Okay, so it's not the end of the world. Just loosen this off. Pull the cable back out. Okay, get our rubber grommet. This is a slightly larger one. It's be interesting to see what way this fits as opposed to the smaller one. But look, larger is probably going to be better. So we'll try it. We'll test it and see if we find that it is too long or too big. We can always use the original. There's nothing wrong with the original. It's actually in very good condition. Okay. Cable goes back through here. Pull that up. You'd almost want to have another hand here. In fact, there's actually a tool called a fourth hand tool. It comes in very handy here, and it allows you to apply tension or spring pressure that cable and hold it in place so that you can adjust. I actually have one hidden around here somewhere. See if I can move this one. Okay. So this is called a cable tensioner or puller, also known as the fourth hand tool. It's a great little device. You have your ratchet on the end here. Cable goes in through here and runs through here, and this lever here applies pressure to the cable. Once it's got pressure on it, we set where you want it to be, and the latch locks into place and holds the cable in place. It's quite a good little system. So what we'll do is we'll run it through, and we'll see how good this really is. Run it through, apply pressure. Once we have pressure, put on our latch, let the latch go, and bingo, our fourth hand doing all the work. Okay, so before we get too excited, we're going to put the wheel on. We're going to line up the pads to the rim, and then we're going to make our final adjustments on here. So bear with me one, guys. We're just going to grab the rim and we're going to install it. So now that we have the wheel on, what we'll need to do is we'll need to stop the handlebars from moving when we're trying to adjust the brake. So how we get around that is we can use a bungee cord. Wrap around the handlebars, the seat, whatever works for you. It just stops it from moving. Okay, so we have the wheel on, right? So the number one thing here we want to check for is spring tension on the levers, the posts themselves. And the other thing as well is I actually copped that the torque for this is somewhere between 6 to 8 Newton meters, and these are actually 8 to 10, so we will have to adjust them to 10 Newton meters. Okay, so we'll do that now real quick. Okay, we'll loosen this off and we'll go up to 10 Newton meters, which is right here. Okay, so there's 10. Same thing again, guys. What we want to do is we just want to make sure that we get a good positive pull and that we are not stopping anywhere. Listen for that positive click. There it is. That's 10 Newton meters. Same on the other side. On top, and there we go. Okay. Now. Okay, I'll just set this to 6. Actually, we'll do 8 because the upper limits of this is 8 meters. Just right there. Okay, so I'm kind of happy enough with that length that's on the cable. You can see that I've snipped the cable and I've tucked it in behind the post. You want to get a look at that there, cameraman Killian. So, in order to keep this cable nice and clean and stop it from fraying and getting all bent, what we do is we just tuck the cable in behind the post, like so, and let it run down. You can of course trim off any excess, and we'll put the end cap on shortly. So let's give this a quick nip. This is set to 8 Newton meters. Okay. We'll have to redo that again because I didn't leave myself enough room. So that's a prime example right there. Okay. Just take that off. Wind this off. Okay, let's put it up there. Okay. So we go from the top this time. Top. And pull until we get our positive. Click. And that lets us know that we've reached the 8 Newton meters torque. Okay, so just going to dial this back to 0. As I said before, the reason we do that is we just want to maintain the calibration in the torque wrench. Okay, so we have our brake setup. Now, see the way we have one brake pad rubbing against the wheel. Okay, so I need to adjust that because it means the spring pressure is not enough on one side. So we adjust our spring pressure. These screws here, Phillips head. There's one on this side as well. So we screw clockwise, that will put tension on. If we go anti-clockwise, that will take tension off. It's always a good idea to pull the lever as you go. Okay. There's actually too much tension on this side, so I'll just let that off. Okay. And what we're looking for here, guys, is we're looking for equal spring tension on both sides. And see the way the rim has just started moving? See that? So that tells me that we have equal spring tension on both sides of the brakes, of the pads. Okay? So that's what we're looking for. A little bit too much on this side. Okay. That's what we're looking for. Now the pads themselves are not set correctly. What I mean by not set correctly is we haven't counted for toe in, toe out on the pad itself. If we take a look this way, I push the block in, you might get a top view. And you can see the way that this pad is more or so in line with the rim here. So you don't want that, okay? That will cause vibration in the rim. You get a horrible, horrible squeal. So what you want to do is you want to allow for a little bit of pad toe in, toe out. And that's what these concave and convex washers and spacers are for. They allow for that, so we can adjust that. We have a look at the other side. It's actually not as bad. It's kicking out at the back there. Push the pad in. It looks like it's actually, yeah. So there's a little bit of toe out there. It's going that way. It's not as bad as this side. So what we can do then is we can adjust. We'll do this side first because I have the bungee on that side. Actually not bad at that. I pull my brake. The other thing as well, guys, is bear in mind when you have the tyre on here, this area, the rim will swell out slightly, a little bit. Now it's minute, tiny amounts, but it is something to bear in mind. And when the tyres have swelled, sometimes it can rub or hit the top of the pad. So just bear in mind that when you're setting your brakes up, bang the tyre on as well. And the reason why I have it off here is so that you guys can see, get a better view as to what way the pads are aligned and how we set them up. So I'm just going to jump up and have a look and see. Okay. Okay, so that's actually not bad. This side isn't bad because we've got a little bit of, I don't know if the camera can pick it up. We have a little bit of toe out at the back here. So if I was to put a shim in here at the back, it would sit in there nicely. It wouldn't get in at the front because the block meets the rim here. So that's kind of what we want. and from a height point of view, I would probably bring that block down a small bit just to facilitate the likes of a tire. So we can adjust that like so. These pads, the actual locking nut, also has a torque on them as well. Something to bear in mind. That's kind of what we're looking for. Just come down off of the rim. Just give it a little pinch, don't go crazy. You will take it out of alignment if you over tighten it. That's kind of what we're after there. So we're leaving enough space, and it is coming out of the back and slightly in at the front. If you want to do the other side. So what we'll do is we'll just take off this bungee and we will have a look at the other side. Okay. Yeah. I'll bring the bike around this way. So have a look. Okay. And see if I can set back up my bungee. Just to stop it from moving on me. Okay. Right. So when we spin our rim, it's okay. So there's a slight buckle in this rim. I will have to screw it up later on. But this pad here is fine because you can see we're looking down from the top. There's a nice toe out, and at the back it's coming in. It's actually doing the opposite when we hit the buckle part. We can adjust that. If you're in a bind, guys, right, and you, like there's a buckle there, and you're like you know, I'm out on the road, I need to get home. It's this rubbing noise is doing my head in. You can use the spring tension on the screws to basically alleviate that problem. It's a little workaround. It's not a permanent fix, and the reason why it's not a permanent fix is because it will take the balance, the spring pressure balance, out of balance basically. To be all skewed, the post or the lever will be kind of tilted to one side, and the other one might be like this, one might be like this, or vice versa. So it's not a good idea to have that as a permanent solution. It's just a quick fix, but you always want to make sure that you have a balanced braking system so that both sides have equal pressure. So there's a little bit too much on this side. Just notice when I'm moving the handlebars, the cable is reacting here. I do have a little tie back here, a little tie back, hold it in place. So we've too much tension on this side. That's not bad there. Yeah, there we go. That's what you want. Like that. Even Steven. Okay. So we just want to check this pad and see. So we're a little bit low here. The pad is a little bit low. So we're just going to bring that pad up a touch, and we're going to check to make sure that we have a little bit of toe out here at the back. So we want the front touching a little bit and this back just kicking out in that direction a little bit more. So we can adjust that here. Okay, so just bring it up a little bit, and we get a little bit of toe in, a little bit of toe at the back. Bring her up, give her a slight pinch. Okay. Let's check for alignment. Looks fine. Looking down from the top, you can see her toe in, and her toe out at the back of the pad, which is fine. That's kind of what we're looking for. Rotate. Okay, happy days. And when we pull, we have a nice even connect to the rim with our toe in and toe out in place, also to stop that horrible squeal when we brake. Okay, sounds like something rubbing there, but I guess the toe in here slightly. So just bring it back a tiny bit, nothing major. Okay, see how that does us. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I'll just check that spring tension on this side as well. It's a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have this done, our final adjustment can be done on the barrel up top here. You can just wind this in or out for our final adjustment. And you can of course adjust the cable down here on the post again if you want to get more tension on. But that's kind of what you're looking for. Kind of a half pull on the front, more than enough. Okay. That leaves us then to put on the little end cover on the cable. Okay, so let's take that off. And we'll put on our little end cover onto the cable, and our crimpers is just on the inside here. It's the top one right there. So without further ado, I'll just bring that on. In fact, it's just a little bit too much cable length there than I like, so I'll just take a little bit off. Okay, so that's that gone. Put on our end cap. And the whole idea of an end cap, guys, is we want to stop the cable from fraying, and we want to keep it nice and clean and neat and stop any further problems down the line. So putting an end cap on is always a good idea. So that's it there. The camera can pick that up. Give it a little pinch. That's that crimped. We can do one more if we wish. Just move it down. Okay, so now that we have the end cap on the cable, we can check to make sure that our spring tension on both sides is equal, which it is. We adjusted that earlier. You can see both posts are moving at the same rate, in and out. Okay, and then we want to make sure that runs through, which it does. I adjusted the cable a little bit more to give me just a little bit more tension here. It was a little bit looser earlier when I was playing around here. Adjusted that and it's a lot nicer. Okay, so that is done. We have our cable in, we have our brake box on, set, toe in, toe out set, cap on the cable. One thing I did notice when I was changing over the noodle, this is the original noodle, and you can see that this piece here is longer than this piece. So this is just all in one noodle. This doesn't come apart, whereas this one does. And this affects the cable length. Now, looking at this here, and especially when I move the wheel, it affects the tension on this because the cable is being pulled. So what I'll do is later on I'll just shorten this, and that will solve that problem. It's just slightly too long. I have the tie back here, and I'm trying to keep it in one position. But yeah, so later I'll just take a little small piece out of that, and that will solve that problem. And I'll check our spring tension again, make sure everything's 100%. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it, really. Obviously, you're going to do the same thing on the back with the brakes. So join me on the next video where we cover obviously the gears themselves. We'll recable them, we'll do them again, we'll index them correctly, and we'll explain to you how the V-screw works, setting the puller limitation between the cassette and the wheel itself, and we'll look at servicing the hubs, headset and the hubs on the wheels, and maybe even the bottom bracket. Just on another note as well, just so I'm not making all this stuff up, I did spend a bit of time over in Manchester with Cytech a good few years ago, back in 2008, and that's where I learned basically how to do all this stuff. I do have a cert knocking around here somewhere. Yep, so here we go, here's the cert. Back in good old 2008 when I was a young chiseler. And that's how I managed to gain my skills back there. It's been a couple of years since I've been on the tools and bikes as well. I now have a family, married and all that jazz, so a bit of time on the bikes only happens kind of in the summer. So it's nice to get back and have a play and basically try and get back into the swing of things again. So guys, look, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something and that maybe you can pass it on to your friends. If you've liked what you've seen here, maybe give us a subscribe, maybe give us a like, hit that notification bell for more upcoming videos. Let your friends know about Gaz-D-Projects, that we don't only do bicycle stuff, we do lots of other projects as well. So stick around, keep your eyes open, and remember, if you like what you see, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscribe. So all that's left for me, guys, is to say thanks very much and take her handy.